Hello, everyone. We welcome you to the Filmmaking Sucks podcast,
where we tell you about all the mistakes you can make while producing a film and explain how you can avoid them yourself.
I'm your host, Manny.
And I'm Lynn.
And we're sitting here today with Snowflake.
A unique snowflake.
Scott Perry.
A snowflake, okay. I like being called a snowflake because we are all little snowflakes.
We're all unique snowflakes in our own
We are
way.
all unique snowflakes.
So, Scott Perry. Scott W. Perry, excuse me. Scott W. Perry.
Very important, that W.
Yeah.
It is, because if you go on IMDb, there's 25 Scott Perrys on there.
I was shocked. You know, when I had my maiden name, I was the only one on like the whole goddamn planet. Like if you search Lindsay Lamaro, I was the only one out there. Then all of a sudden we get married and I took his name and I'm thinking, how many people are going to have a Spanish last name with the name Lindsay? There's like 8 of them. I hate them all. Lindsay Serranos, I hate you.
I've ruined her career with my name.
Ruined.
The one good thing about it is that I can kind of feign anonymous, and I can remain anonymous in some areas, because it's like you see something like going on. It's like, oh, Scott Perry did that. You go in the mail, you go in the news, and it's like, in New York today, Scott Perry killed a bunch of people. And people are like, oh my God, Scott Perry killed a bunch of people. And it's like, well, it's up in Poughkeepsie. And it's like, wait, Scott doesn't live in Poughkeepsie. And, but then I'm like, you know what?
Scott comes from Amityville.
Come from Amityville. Yeah, that's even better.
That's even better.
But it's like, I can probably play with this and hide for like a month and not deal with anybody. So,
Oh, that's like you have your own, God, what is that? What is the director's name for the director that when you hate a project?
You're not allowed to use those anymore.
Oh, yeah, I know.
You can't anymore.
But now he has his own.
Yeah, now he's got his own.
Alice Smithy, but now he could just go. He could just go by Scott Perry and then just blame it on one of the other ones.
Why not? Everybody, some other people have, so it's nothing anything new in the indie world.
Yeah, I guess so.
So,
but yes, the is it the Writers Guild or right? The Writers Guild won't recognize Alan Smithy anymore.
Directors Guild, actually.
Directors Guild, is it?
Okay. Directors Guild, yeah. Right. Because it was only a directing thing. I think writing. There might be an alias for writing. I don't know.
What's the reason behind that? Why they stopped recognizing Alan Smithy?
Probably discredit the writer, right?
Yeah, it was either credit the writer. There was a movie called Burn. Hollywood Burn, which they joked was an Alan Smithy film until they realized that the director disowned it. Mm-hmm. So they really had to use Alan Smithy for it. And I think that kind of caused that movie sucked, but they had to kind of say, okay, yeah, we're going to get rid of this and remove it. But, it's kind of interesting when you see the name out there and you hear the real stories behind it, 20, 25 years ago. Because they haven't used it in 20 years.
Was Alien 3 Alan Smithy?
No, that was still David Fincher.
Oh, he did, because I know he disowned the movie.
Yeah, he did it after
because
the fact.
He didn't like the cut at all. He didn't like what they did with it.
Which it just shows how good of a director he's become, because with the stories behind it and the fact that you still have a good movie even when his cut was disowned, shows you how much of a talent he was.
His version was so much better, but the original, regular theater version was still great.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people gave it a lot of shit, but I think it's because he spat on it, so I think that people just kind of went with it, like, well, the director doesn't like it, so it's got to be crap.
And it was put in a position to fail from day one because it had to follow Aliens, which is really, it's very hard to top
at one point James Cameron made some of the best sequels. You know what I mean? He really did.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, Scott,
yes,
tell us a little bit about yourself. What is it that you do?
Well, I'm kind of, I guess you can call in the indie world a jack of all trades. I'm a director, I'm a writer, I'm a producer. I mainly am known here in the New York tri-state area for a web series I did called In Fear Of, which is an anthology series about phobias.
Okay.
I believe that's how I met you two fine people.
Yeah.
In addition, I've written many scripts. I've produced a few short films and written them, directed them, and just basically trying to get my name out there like everybody else is.
Cool.
So.
Very cool.
Now, In Fear Of, how many of those episodes since we're gonna cover writing today, let's do that.
Yeah.
First things first, we're gonna cover writing,
yes.
Screenplays, writing a screenplay,
yes.
The structure of it, even your own personal writing style, your process towards writing. So let's start off with In Fear Of. How many of those episodes did you write?
Well, we made 20. I wrote 9.
Okay.
That we produced. 8 I directed myself. 1 I wrote and co-directed with somebody else. The great Debbie Rochon, of course. I wrote it for her. It was her. She gave me the story, and I wrote it, for her. But I was pretty much involved in the development of all of them.
Okay.
Mainly from a script standpoint and from a production standpoint. But everything always begins with the script. So, one of the things that I always looked for when I did it was to make sure that I fit the tone of the overall series flow that I was going for. I think I mainly succeeded. In some cases I failed. But I would say for the most part I succeeded. But I kind of used, since I was the creator of it, I kind of told everybody to use the episodes that I did to start off as a template, for that.
So were yours the first 8 then, or
no? We did like a 6 episode, like kind of like a preview.
Okay. Just
to see if it would work. I did 3 of them.
Okay.
And I had one other person do 2, and I had another one do 1. It's interesting because 2 of them had no script. It was basically just get a bunch of people together and let's just try to see what we can. The
indie way.
The indie way.
The no budget way.
The no budget indie way, which is, for that you pretty much have to do that in the editing room, so I kind of can't count them. We did something similar like that for myself in the second season, but I wrote it. And I think it's funny because I remember a review saying it. It's like, oh yeah, the second season episode. It's like this other episode directed by this other person. It said, but this one has a story behind it. And I'm like, well, we took the time to really go with it and try to see what we have because. Without a solid foundation and a structure and a story, it kind of shows you that, you can get a little lost on it. You can find some good things in there. You can find good things for performance, but when you're working in an anthology series, just performance isn't enough. You need to have a structure to get the series and the whole flow going.
Right.
Yeah.
Either do it, very structured, or you don't, or you just. I don't know. One will drag down the rest in a way.
Yeah, I edited 1 for season 1, and the director behind it, he wrote a musical piece before he had the story down. He wrote everything. He did the storyboards, did everything right. He did everything great. But then when it came down to the music, he had the music set before the film was done.
Interesting.
And he insisted on cutting it that way.
To the music.
So I was cutting it, and I kind of felt a lot of the story got lost in transition because it was bouncing back and forth too much to the point where it was really confusing the audience. And I remember looking at it and I told him flat out, you need to cut a minute out of this because, and this is 6 minutes long, but I'm like, you need to cut a minute out of it because there's a point in the story where you go back to before the conflict happened and it makes no sense to have it there other than the fact that you just want to put that musical cue in.
Right.
So, and I remember he got mad at me about it because he's like, that's my vision, it's everything like that. And he went, it's my vision. I went, but it's my series.
Yep.
And
that's funny. That's what we did for Blood Slaughter. I do that a lot. I find that to be easier to cut things down. Like with Blood Slaughter, we had, I'm going to say, we had the theme done before we started shooting.
Yeah.
And a lot of the cues, a lot of the music cues were written, but I guess, again, it depends on what the process was, but the way we did it was he gives me all the individual layers when he writes it, so this way, even if something doesn't, because most of the time I'll cut to the music so that it kind of has a good flow.
No, it does help greatly.
Yeah, but then I'm able to tear it apart because I have all the different stems, all the different layers of the music. So if something doesn't fit, I can trim it manually. So I can cut the music down too. It sounds like the music was more like completed already.
Yeah, no, it is. It's funny when I say that because when I did, I actually did it to that point when I had a composer do the music for one complete scene in one of my first short films, Insatiable, which is online. And, he had it set before I even cut it. And I found that helped me get the flow of it. And it was the first, and I didn't edit the rest of the film. I edited that scene first, which was this big elaborate dream scene with the serial killer. He's got all his victims in plastic looking at him in this abandoned movie theater, which I was nuts. This was 10 years ago. I was nuts then. I'm nuts now, but it was, when we were talking about this, I actually looked it up. I looked it up again, and I'm still proud of it all these years later. The only regret is I didn't shoot it in HD, but but that was one of those things, even because that was a script, that was a film that has no dialogue on it, but I still wrote a script.
Yeah. Well, of course.
And we still had all the beats.
I think even that you really, when there's no dialogue, I think you really need a script more. So that this way your actors have a clear cut line of what exactly they're doing in the exact order, all the beats, everything's written out. I mean, unless you're doing something very artistic and strange, but
do you have to have a reason behind it?
Yes.
I've seen so many things where somebody I used to work with, and I would edit his stuff, and he would give me hours and hours of footage, and he would give me like, okay, these are the best takes, these are this, now do something with it. And then I would do everything that he would instruct me to do, and he says, I'm not feeling it, do it like this. And then I'm like, okay, I'll do it like this. And then he's like, I'll go put it back the other way. And I'm just like, well, you make up your fucking mind. I said, this is why you need a story. This is why you need a script. At least something of a foundation for it. You know? And, I did something like that with, it's funny because I'm guilty of the same thing. I did, it was 5 years ago, I did a little piece to music, the 9 Inch Nails Ghosts.
Yeah. You did
when
number
he had
13.
I did number 13, which everybody did, but I think I did one of the better ones of it. I just did it a few years too late from the film festival, but I wanted to do it because I'm like, I just wanted to do something associated with 9 Inch Nails, and I had this idea in my head, and I did it. But even then, even though we kind of went a little against the grain, I still had the concept down.
Yeah.
And I still wrote it down, and there was a beginning, there was a middle, and there was an end, for a 4-minute piece. It's, as they say, the 3-act structure.
Yeah.
You need it for a full-length script, you need it for a short script. And that was one thing that, within Fear of, I wanted to make sure that everybody had. There had to be that within it.
Had to be a complete story.
Had to be a complete story, even if it was 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, or 20.
Yeah.
And they varied in length on that. Like I said, for the most part, I think we succeeded. There were a couple that didn't follow that formula too well, and I think it kind of suffered for it. But for the most part, none of mine, of course.
Of course not.
Well, no, never.
No, but it's funny because I did episodes, and in Fear of, I guess we'll talk about this more in the producing one, but from a writing standpoint, there are some that, and even then on a set, if we deviated from the script a little bit, but as long as we kept the structure there, we were fine.
I think to me, that's what the script is the most important thing, where it's like, it's leading where you're going with things. As an AD, I'm constantly, where are we going? Where were we coming from? I'm constantly, making sure that everybody, before they even get on set, all the actors know, kind of what scene we're doing, and and I can answer questions for them. And I feel like the script is what leads the entire production. So to not have one.
And it also helps the actors a lot. I am a proponent of rehearsal. I would love rehearsal if I have the chance to do it, but with everybody having full-time jobs and
it's so hard.
a lot of other things, it's very difficult. The last short film that I did, Once When I Was Dead, I had cast from LA, Chicago, and New York.
Wow.
Jeez.
So we were all over the place. But the good thing is, my actors from LA, basically Tiffany Shepis, Gabrielle Stone, by the time they got on the set, they knew the script inside and out. So I didn't really have to direct them as much as I could. Because, they were like, do you mind if we do this? I said, yeah. And I remember saying, halfway near the end of the shoot, I'm like, I hope you don't mind. I haven't really given you much direction because I think you're doing it well. And I think it was Gabrielle turned to me. She's like, well, the script was so good and we were prepared. It's like, I knew this character inside and out from everything we talked about. And
that's where you want to be.
Yeah, that's exactly where I want to be. Like I said, there's no wrong way of doing it. If you want to, be artistic and you want to do something, improv is good, for that, but make sure you have something within it. If you're just going to get a bunch of people together and have one location and said, okay, let's just do something, you're going to end up with chaos, and if you've seen that, and if you've seen a few films at some festivals that do that, you know what I mean. Yeah. So, yeah.
So specifically, then, since we're gonna do a second episode with you, we'll talk about producing it. So,
I got stories.
So, from a writing standpoint, then, what's your process? Where do you begin when it comes to writing?
Well, I will say this. Even though a lot of people in the indie world, they mainly know me as a producer for In Fear Of, and that's kind of because of putting it all together. That's kind of where everybody knows.
But knowing you, I know that
writing is my love.
Yeah, that's your first
writing
love.
is my first
Yeah,
love.
you love writing.
If anything, it's writing because it's just a creative process. It doesn't cost any money to do it. To get the final draft program, it's like $100, but that's it.
Yeah, but then that's everything for the rest of. Yeah, me personally, I'm not a big fan of writing. I get ideas, but when I'm writing a script, I saw you you posted earlier. You said you finished a script compared to most people.
Earlier today.
How do they feel? How do people feel? Are they happy or are they sad when they finish a script?
Yeah, it's weird.
I'm happy. Because I want to get
relieved
into
it's done.
Yeah, I'm a production person.
It depends.
Once the script is done, that means we can move forward and I can start shooting.
Well, it's funny. I kind of look at the Princess Bride at the end when he's like, Manny Patinkin's and Ningo, and he's like, I've been in the revenge business of so long, and now that I fulfilled it, I don't know what to do. That's exactly how I feel when I finish a film or I finish a script.
Yeah.
It's like, it's weird. For this particular script, I don't want to get too much into it, but, I finished it. It was actually a draft I'd written a long time ago, and I went back to it, and I changed everything with it. I started it again from scratch, so I had that foundation from a while ago.
Oh, I hate that.
I actually enjoyed it this time around because as I'm older, there was a lot more I kind of learned in life that I didn't when I first wrote it over a decade ago. So it's like, I'm glad to do that because of those life experiences that I had. But it's weird because it was like I was a little disappointed when I finished it because I'd been working on it and working on it and working on it. And it's like, all right, well, what do I do next? And that's always the question I ask. But now I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, now that I'm done, now that I finished it, I can now show it to people who I want to get involved with it. Now I can get that together. It's like
that's the
next thing I do.
That's my world. I'm like, you have a finished script. I want to color it. I want to break it down and get my markers. Let's do this.
Yeah, and that's kind of the next step. And it's like from that point in, most of the changes from that are usually dialogue tweaks or pacing issues.
Well, I think
stuff like that.
That's part of my reason for not wanting to rewrite much, because I know that when we get to set, things are going to change.
It depends on the director you get. I direct my own material, which I know a lot of writer directors are always like, it's my way or the highway, and you got to listen, you got to write it, you got to say it every single syllable I say.
Not.
And I don't do that because a script is a blueprint, and it's like you're bringing all this talent in. Not only to help you with it, but they're supposed to make their best job as well. So if you're bringing them in for a reason, listen to them and embrace it.
Yeah,
and if they have a better idea, use it.
Well, you notice too, when you're writing a script, you may have an idea for a character, and then you get an actor who's just like, you just love them. Yeah. Even though they may not have been the initial vision you had for the character, they are so good. They may take it to places that you never even considered. Yeah. And that is going to bring a whole new dynamic to the story and make it like Theta States, we wanted it to be, I had written it for a different friend, for another friend for Mike Roach. And I envisioned him near the end just being completely manic and off the wall and just being so totally over the top and losing his mind from the insomnia and the dreams and the nightmares and everything coming to life. I pictured him being very like, I can't even. We did a short with him, Sleepless, which was the beginning of Theta States, and that's what I wanted him to do at the end of Theta. I wanted him to get like totally manic and off the wall, like he's on speed or something. But then Tom Ryan, when he did it, I didn't change the script. I gave it to him as is, and he took it to more aggression rather than mania. Yeah, which brought a whole different dynamic, and it actually made the movie darker, but still less of a horror and more of a sci-fi. Like it brought it more to kind of I guess in that, what was that? The Event Horizon. Yeah, more like Event Horizon. Very like people, like he's going crazy, but it's causing this animal to come out of him. Yeah, like he became like this really enraged and I had pictured originally being more like
almost like the Joker.
more like the Joker mania. So it totally changed the movie. I think that it would have been scarier with Roach simply because he would have made it almost non-human anymore. Yeah. It would have brought him to a level of someone that you never see. Like, this person doesn't actually exist. This level of mania doesn't exist. But Tom Ryan made it more realistic, which made him more relatable.
Yeah.
And I think people can connect to it more that way. So that's why I don't.
Well, you bring on something I remembered, because I remembered, back about 10 years ago when Project Greenlight was all the rage, for the finalists that they had, they all got the same script and were told to each do a film based on the script, and all of them did different things with it.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example of what you're saying, and how, it was
with the
same
chair.
it was
chair did that
the
too.
same
The chair did that. It
dialogue,
was
the same
excellent.
thing. Yeah. And, it just goes to show you that a script in the hands of other people, it can be interpreted many different ways. It's finding that right combination with it.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't really have much to do with writing, but like I think it really, those filmmakers who are like, this is my script, and the script is God, and there is no changing this, not even a word, nothing. Like I think it's like they almost miss out on so much collaboration and creativity, and like I think in some ways, like your characters or your interpretation of what this would be, and you're not going to know everything. You haven't experienced everything in the world, and you haven't walked through other people's shoes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So actors will bring something that you never even thought to have.
It's like okay, we all love Kubrick, and he did dozens of takes for everything.
More like hundreds.
Whatever. He did so many numerous takes of everything.
And so many people I know just want to be like Kubrick and just will do 100 takes just for the sake of doing 100 takes.
Yeah, but no.
They're like, I want to be like Kubrick.
Yeah,
Well,
he did 100 takes because he wanted different styles. He wanted to see every scene done completely differently and then piece it all together. Say, all right, well, like Jack Nicholson, when he started really pushing him, he would get to a point where Jack Nicholson would get so upset that they were doing so many takes that
and
he
not
would
getting
just
direction,
he would just go ridiculous. He'd do stupid faces and he would get ridiculous with it.
Yeah, but Kubrick got what he wanted.
But that's what Kubrick wanted.
Exactly.
He saw him do it in earlier scenes because they shot that film almost completely sequentially.
Yeah,
because that's how Kubrick shot. He shot sequentially. Yeah. So he saw that bit where Jack Nicholson thought that he was ruining the take, but he's like, there's something in that he loved. So he would just keep doing it until Nicholson got so annoyed that he would try to ruin the take. Like the other one is in Doctor Strangelove, what's his name?
George C. Scott.
George C. Scott.
Yeah.
He would
play one take serious and then one take completely over the top. And
well, he wanted him to do. He wanted to the over the top takes. He didn't realize they were rolling on them.
Yeah.
Because he just wanted to see. He would tell them, "Oh, let's just see it," and they were rolling. And and those are the takes he used in the film. And George C. Scott was really pissed. Pissed him off. And then years later, watching the film, he said, "You know what? This is one of my best performances." Yeah. He appreciated it later on because he couldn't see what it was. He was so blinded by just being upset at what he decided to use that he didn't see what the movie itself was. He was just,
Yeah, but that's the director's interpretation of what the script will be. So there's different, things with that. But getting back to what you were saying, Lindsay, in terms of collaboration, screenwriting. When I started writing scripts, because my intention at first was just to be a screenwriter and just to sell scripts and do that. I always wanted to be like a writer-director, but I kind of felt my love was in screenwriting. That's my biggest strength, so I figured I'd try that. And if I can sell a few scripts and get a job like, working on a TV show, that'd be great, So there were, at the time, this is like 15 years ago, maybe dating myself, but
someone's got to date you.
Well, one of the first experiences I had was, Francis Ford Coppola had zoetrope.com where you could put your script on up there and people are looking at it. And there's always one guy who'd be like, the format's wrong. This script will never sell without even looking at the story.
Oh, no.
And he would always give it like 1 star. But there was another site, and I don't know if it's up now because I haven't been on it in a while, but Kevin Spacey ran it called Trigger Street. And that's where I kind of really started to understand the basis of screenwriting because I didn't go to school for it. I learned through some of the best books. I picked them up and I read them and I read them and I reread them, almost religiously from like 1999 to 2002. And it took that 3-year period before I even began thinking of writing, that way I can understand it, that much better. I haven't read some of these in 15 years, but some of them I still,
it's in the memory bank. Yeah.
It's in the memory bank, and it's good to go back to it. It's good to go back to it. But, one of the things I remember was one of the scripts I had on that site was a top 10 script for 30 days. And then it became an option, and nothing happened for it. But at the time it was good because there were like thousands of people on there. And a lot of the advice was really good. And, I really enjoyed that collaboration, that's kind of where the ball really started to get rolling on it. And when I decided to do short films, I figured, well, let me do some short films, kind of get the ball, get going on it. And I kind of like directing and writing at the same time, but if I ever had a preference, it would just be writing.
See, that's a huge thing. I mean, I think there's a lot of filmmakers out there who think that like, oh, once the script is done, it's done, and we just proceed. And it's like, no, there's a whole process of letting people read it and getting input and feedback.
And they'll change it. If you sell it, they'll change everything with it, and you're just going to have to accept that. And
I have a friend who's not into horror at all. He just likes movies, I mean, not that he's not into horror, but it's got to be a good horror. It's got to be really good. Yeah. And whenever I finish a script, I give it to him first, and I keep him totally in the dark. I say, here, read this. Let me know what you think. And I always look at it like, you know what? He's not my target audience. He's not the person I'm making this film for. But if he can read it and like it, then it's good. Because for number one, he knows I want his honesty. So he'll just outright say, no, I don't like this at all.
Yeah, I do the same.
I think that as a writer, you have to have someone like that. Don't give the script to your mother. Don't give it to your brother. Don't give it to your best friend.
Grandma will always love everything you do.
Exactly. Your family and friends are always going to love it. Find that one person who is not, I'm not going to say somebody who doesn't like you, but although that would be the greatest thing, you get somebody who can't stand you and they still say, oh, this is amazing. Find that person who can give you their honest, unbiased opinion to say, you know what,
that one friend that has no problem telling you that, I don't think you should wear that. Maybe you should go change.
Yeah,
they should be reading your script.
I have quite a few.
That friend who says, don't quit your day job.
No, I hear you on that, but
but I think that's another really. I mean, it doesn't really have to do with the writing as a process, but one thing that's getting to me now, I think the more time we spend in this kind of indie scene, and the more kind of people that we meet, is that a lot of writers who are, I've used the term lightly, I guess, writers that are out there that are literally giving it to another independent filmmaker to go and make their movie. You see so many of these relationships go wrong.
Yeah.
And it's almost because the writer just, because they don't have the life experience as a writer, or if they just don't understand.
It's because don't mean to interrupt.
You know what I'm saying.
It's because they're so in love with their words.
Yeah.
It's like a director being so in love. It's why... and it took me a very long time to realize this. I'm an editor too.
Yeah.
And
oh God, you love every piece of footage you shot.
Every piece
it's so hard to cut.
And there's people we know who do that, where you look at the film and you see every single shot imaginable that they
Blood
did.
Slaughter Massacre.
Put
What?
in there. I didn't say which one, but actually, I wasn't thinking of that one. I'm thinking of some.
We are quite guilty of that.
But it's interesting because I think with the indie world, it's everybody just wants to do their own thing, and when you're only stuck to one, I think a lot of people, they're so in love with that one thing that it's hard for them to take again, just to get away from it.
Yeah.
When I did a very personal short film a few years ago that I wrote and directed and everything, and when I was putting it together, I needed somebody else to do it because I was too involved with it.
Too close to it.
Too close to it. And I'm glad I did, because it turned out to be a better film as a result. And with writing, it's tough, but it's like, as long as you accept that writing is a blueprint, and it's fine. I come up with an idea virtually almost every day. Like, I come up with a new idea, and I'll write it down, but I'll write it down as a log line first, and I'll get back to it.
So it kind of gives you some time to separate from the initial idea and the love that you had for the initial idea.
Yeah, but
you give yourself the gift of time.
Yeah, but there's some scripts I have that are favored over others where I'm like, I would love to direct this myself, but there are others where I'd be like, I would love to try to sell this if I can.
Right.
I have a couple ideas like that.
It's kind of a balance between the two.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I got a couple ideas like that I like. I started writing. I was like 2 or 3 pages into it, and I remember when I was writing it, I loved it, and it never fully formed. So months, maybe 2-3 years later, I come back to it, and I look at it, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking?
Oh, there are scripts.
Like, I was so in love with the idea at the time. Where the hell was I going with this nonsense? Like, this is just crap.
Yeah. I posted a few months ago on Facebook, or I put down, I said, I finally found a script I written 12 years ago. It was the first time I looked at it in years, and it totally sucked. Yeah. I looked at it and I'm like, what was I even thinking?
Who was I back then?
Yeah.
Like, what was I even?
That's the thing. Now, is that because it was bad, or just because you've learned so much since then, your standards have come up? flop? Like, was it a really,
mixture of both?
Was it a bad idea in general?
Okay, it was more of a mixture of both.
I find that a lot. I find things that like this may have been a decent idea, but I just went about it so wrong, and thinking about how badly I went about writing it, I almost can't re-envision it in a good way.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing, I'm gonna get into this in a second, that I find interesting, and it kind of does with filmmaking, but also in a writing standpoint. You have to be a little bit psychic about the business as well to try to see what's going to be hot and everything like that. But then, you have, and you can tell when you see it. What I'm good at that. I like to call bandwagon writers who will just, and I've written a few scripts with some other people, and I remember this one script I'm trying to sell, and my co-writer on it, found footage was the big thing at the time. And she wanted to make this whole found footage movie because she knew somebody who would give money to make it found footage. And I'm like, I don't like it. Yeah. And she's like, well, you don't like the concept of the found footage? I said, it's not that I don't like the concept of it.
You didn't like doing it as a found footage? I didn't like doing it as a concept because she's like, well, we're going to add, first said, you're going to add these new characters who are supposed to be this like ghost crew or something like that. And I just told him, I said, it's a horrible idea for one reason. And she goes, why? I said, because you're taking the story away from the main narrative that we have, which is the main character. It's not from their point of view. If you're going to do that, you're going to take the entire point of view away. You might as well rewrite the entire script. And that was the argument I had. I wound up winning the argument, which is a rarity for me. But it was just one of those things where she just wanted to sell something. And I'm like, if you're just going to do it to try to sell something, I understand that, but it has to be formed as a found footage.
It would have to be formed as something else, but you got to have a good reason why you want to do that because, getting a check is great, but you don't want to put yourself in a position where you'll be pigeonholed into doing nothing but found footage films for the time.
I mean, not only that, you have more success when you're actually the founder of something. When you actually kick off the newest trend, you get more success and you get more notoriety that way than, actually producing a subpar genre, hot moment of the, trend of the moment or whatever.
Yeah, and you got to look at like certain things and certain trends that are happening, but also you just want to do things. And the other thing is, well, aside from that, maybe think of something that could start to trend yourself, which is more difficult, but it's something that could be achieved. Yeah. I don't think a perfect example is one of the best screenplays I think that should be studied is Pulp Fiction. Mm-hmm. Nobody was looking for anything like that, and it just came out and it just started this whole new wave. So, if there's one script I would say to check out as far as like just learning structure and everything like that, it's probably that one. It's not even my favorite Tarantino film, but it's that's a script.
I love Pulp Fiction too, but Death Proof is my favorite of his. I love Death Proof. Absolutely love it. I'd love to read the script one day and see how close to the dialogue is in there versus what they made come to life. Because a lot of I know a lot of people like see Death Proof and the girls' conversation, like they're just like, oh my God, they're going on about nothing. But that's just because, are you interested in what these characters have to say, or are you just
waiting for them to die?
Yeah. I watch it like I think that they're very well written and formed, created
because you become
characters.
Attached to them. So when that moment happens, you miss them on screen.
That's exactly. And I think that's what makes it so
for
good.
A film in a genre. That's very tough to do. Yeah. You want it to be missed. You want them to be missed when they're not. And
what I really love about Death Proof is that he did it twice in the course of one film.
Yeah,
he got two totally separate sets of protagonists, built them up, and then brought them to an end. Yeah. And you gave a shit about both sets. You really did. Yeah. And I think that the fact that you watched the first set come to such a grisly end made it so much better when
because you knew it was coming for the other ones.
Yeah, and you're like, oh God,
you were already upset for the first.
Exactly. Yeah. You already watched this happen to the beginning. Now you're just expecting it to happen again, and you're like, oh God, no.
It raised the stakes in this way that it would nothing else would have.
You knew exactly what was going to happen to them.
Now, as much as I said Pulp Fiction should be a script that's studied, I was kind of thinking about it as you said that. Reservoir Dogs is a perfect example of doing a script in one location. Mm-hmm. In terms of if you're looking to do something on a budget, or if you're thinking budget conscious and you just want to do it, of films like that, as indie people, your script has to fucking shine.
Let's get into let's focus on that then.
Okay.
Let's get into that then. A lot of mainly what we like to who we're talking to here is those people who are really starting their first, second, maybe even their third film. These are the people who are like us, who are working full-time jobs and making their films on the side. Yeah. So every single thing we shoot, every day that we schedule is extremely important because we don't have the next 30 days set aside to make this movie where, oh, well, you know what, let's take our time. No, we don't have that.
Well, I do now because I'm special. No.
Well, yes.
That's why you are a snowflake, my friend.
No, I get what you're saying.
So when you're going into your first, let's for argument's sake, let's say your first feature. Okay. You know, now you haven't made a feature yet. You've made
technically
your own written, directed,
as one narrative feature. No, but the way I kind of looked at it, because somebody famous said this to me. He's like, so you haven't done a feature? I said, well, I did. If you put all the episodes of In Fear of that I wrote and directed together, they come to an hour and 40 minutes. And he's like, all right, you did a feature. So I kind of look at it that. But as far as
an anthology, though, even if you made it to be that way, I mean, technically, then if you did it that way, you did an ABCs of Death of your own.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's one way that a lot of people do it because they do shorter because. It's like, oh, if we do a short film and we get everybody together, we can all show what we can do in short bursts. Well, as an indie person told me from around here, from a very prestigious company here, Glass Eye, said to me, I can say the name on this, James Felix McKenney. I remember he said to me one time, he's like, well, all you're doing with a feature, you're just doing the same thing you did at a short. It's just more days. That's all it is. He's like, so you're doing everything already. It's just you're doing it in a longer base of time. So, and what he's saying is right. For somebody doing a first feature, as I'm actually currently trying to do, the first thing that's good if you really want to get budget conscious. If you're going to write to your heart's content and do whatever you want, but if you want to do something that you want to direct as well, or if you want to, get out there, you do have to think budget with it. And then from a writing standpoint, and I've been doing this now a lot lately, it becomes more challenging to do that because you have to look at the basis of what you have and what you need.
Okay, so now I'm going to be selfish.
Okay.
I'm not a writer. I am way too much of a producer to be a writer, but I'm actually trying it now. I am a marathon writer. I like to come up with an idea and mull it around for about 3-4 years.
I charge money for screenwriting consultations.
Listen, you're getting some publicity here. Okay,
I'll take Monopoly money. I'm that desperate. But.
I'll tag you in the Filmmaking Sucks cast post. So yeah, I'm a marathon writer. I like to come up with an idea and then let it marinate for 3-4 years. And then finally put the pen to page.
At least it's not 30. I'm one of those guys where it's I'm one of those people where somebody will tell me, oh, I have this available and I have that available. And then an hour later, I'll come up with a script, for one episode.
See, I'm good at that. I can do those 48-hour film competitions.
Yeah.
You give me the rules and regulations and I'll come up with something. But it's when I actually care about it.
I should be doing more of those, to be honest with you. Because
they're fun. They're a lot of fun.
I could probably knock a lot out, but sorry.
It's okay. Sorry about that.
Those are a lot of fun because it gives you kind of a guideline. But So
to my question. Anyway, so here's my problem. So I have this idea. I've been mulling it around for about 3 or 4 years. I'm finally putting it down. I'm 11 pages in, and I have that little producer voice in my head popping up and saying, "What are you doing? We don't have this location. What are you doing?" Because I came up with this idea that worked in one location, and that was it. And now it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
All right. Well, there's a script I just finished that I'm looking to do where I had, it's about this main character is he's basically, he feels trapped in this one place. And when I was writing it, I rewrote it. I finished this earlier today, and I'm writing it. And when I rewrote it, I got to page 80, and and I'm going through it and I'm like, okay, he's trapped in the theater. He's doing all these things. And then I went back as I'm realizing, there's scenes of him outside of it. And I'm like, that doesn't describe it as well. So I kind of went back to it and I wrote it because, and it's funny because when I first wrote it, I didn't have anything in mind when I did. I kind of almost gave it away without giving it away, but I had no location in mind doing it. And then when I rewrote it, I do.
Yeah.
So it was like, all right, well, if I have this one location and I know I can film there and I can do a lot of things there, I'm going to keep as much as I can within the theater. But then I kind of thought, it actually will benefit the script better that way because this character feels trapped in it, and it's better to not show him,
not give the audience any release
at all.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, so that's where it's one of the things that benefit with it. I mean, if you now see, since you're a producer.
Yes.
All right. So you're looking to do this yourself. I
Yep.
mean, you're not looking for anybody else to do it, but you're doing it. So I would say for you, it's probably best to write what you know and put everything that you know in it, you know, to start. Locations you have, people you know that you know will do it for a bagel and you know, as I like to say, a bagel and a hand job. No, but you know, but people you know that would do it, but also look for people.
Is that how you got Debbie Rochon?
No comment. No, I'll tell you right now. The reason why I got Debbie Rochon is because she fucking loved the script I sent her.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Oh, no. I meant you offered her a hand job. That's.
she can do a lot better than me.
Well, that's why you bring the bagel. That's how that works.
The bagel. You give her a bagel and a hand job.
You got to put the bagel somewhere. You got to hang it somewhere. In other words. Anyway, no, but I would suggest doing that just to get, you know, just to feel comfortable with it. For your first draft, though, I would say just let it go.
Just let it go and then go back.
Yeah.
Do it. You know, whatever you have, just think of no limits with it, and then in later drafts, you're going to have to start to peel it out and say, okay, what can I do? What can't I do?
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's the best way to write.
I'm going to tell you right now.
Just write.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now. One of the episodes that, for In Fear of, one of my regular writing partners wrote an episode for it, and she gave it to me, and I looked at it, and I'm like, it's great, but there's one problem. And she goes, what? I said, I don't have $75,000 to shoot this. And she goes, well, what's the problem? I said, well, you have this funeral scene. You know, and this is probably better for the producer thing, but from a writing standpoint, see, I had to tell her this from producing a standpoint to a writer. So as a writer, you have to be prepared for a meeting like this because you'll have everything set and you'll have everything that you want to do with it, and then they're like, well, you know, we only have this, so you're gonna have to change it to that. Yeah. And as a writer, you have to keep your ego aside enough to understand that that's going to benefit the project a lot better.
Right.
You know. The good thing is that, you know, I'm planning on putting In Fear of to television. So I told her that first draft, save it for when we go to television, if we get to television, because it's a perfect television script. Mm-hmm. And we'll keep that in because we will have the money for it. But for this, you're going to have to change it because you had this whole funeral scene. I'm like, well, first off, I need to get a funeral home, or even if I get it for free, I got to, because she put, okay, it's decorated with flowers. I said, I got to buy a whole bunch of flowers. It's $2,000 right there.
$2,000 of flowers. Yeah.
You know, it's thousands of dollars of flowers. It's like, I don't have that. So we got to change it to something else. And it worked out a little bit better and actually scarier. You know, instead of having it in a funeral home, we had it in a bedroom.
Okay.
Like, you know, this creepy bedroom, and it just worked better because it's like, because this little kid's supposed to go to a funeral home, and you know, this evil relative is supposed to pop up and grab him, and I'm like, it's much better in the comfort of a room because it's home, it's sanctuary.
Yeah, and death is somehow in the home.
It's a sanctuary. It's the place that they know it's going to be. It's a lot scarier to do it there than in a place that the kid will never be at again.
In a very sterile atmosphere.
It's
one of those things where it's a matter of how important is the location versus the scene itself.
Yes.
You know, when we with Theta, the restaurant scene.
Back to you again.
Yeah. Well, yes, back to me again. No. The restaurant scene was originally written as a nightclub.
Yeah.
You know, and the conversation when she asks him out, she was original when like in the beginning of the film when he first meets her, she says we should go out for drinks. Originally, that was supposed to be a coworker's birthday. Like, oh, we're all going out for this party, and later on they'd be in a nightclub, and then he would have his hallucination and pass out from all the blinking lights and all that stuff. You know, but. We had a location we could have gotten that it wasn't even going to be a nightclub. It was actually going to be a strip club because I know a guy who manages a strip club.
Imagine my shock.
Yeah, you know, but we said, number one, do we want to go through all that? Yeah. That bigness of it, and number two, do I want to expend that connection for a scene that doesn't need to be a nightclub? Like we need to get the feeling of the scene rather than the actual location. Yeah. So we'll hold the strip club off until, like, you know what, this has to be a strip club.
All right, I'm gonna keep you on this for a moment because Theta, you just completed it. It's winning awards everywhere, nationwide. nationwide being New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and Indiana. But
Canada, we got Canada.
Oh, we got Canada. Oh, yeah, international now.
Yeah, we were finalists in LA already too.
Oh, look at this.
See, bi-coastal.
Bi-coastal. North America.
You're moving on up in the world. You're going to ignore me in half a second.
What'd you say?
Nothing.
Just kidding.
Who are you? How'd you get in my apartment?
These things happen. Bagel and a blowjob. That's how I got here.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, actually, it was a hand. Nah, whatever. It's still funny. But when you were writing Theta, because Theta is a very you go very deep into sleep hypnosis and all that. But you were looking into that most of all. That was the first thing you were really looking at into it. From there, you probably went. Did you go in there like, okay, where can I shoot at? It's like you have a scene in an auto shop. You obviously knew somebody and you got somebody in there. So it's like, okay, we got.
Originally, it was a supermarket.
Yep.
Okay.
I had originally written it. Yeah. And again, it was one of those things. It really doesn't matter where he works.
Oh, we battled. We battled so hard on it though.
Yeah.
Because, he wanted a very blue collar-y kind of guy. He didn't want an office worker.
Yeah.
And it's like, offices are a dime a dozen. You can get an office, you can get something that looks like an office. It's just here's an office chair and here's a desk. Done. So as a producer, we battled, and we finally kind of came up with something that we had access to that still kept the character as he wanted him and as he created him.
Yeah. Well, but you did it to benefit, and I think you got a better result out of it. But
I think it made it more real for sure.
Yeah, and so but that all begins when you're writing a script and you try to get everything together about this character, and you're getting it together. It's like, okay, well now we need to incorporate this moment into everything. Mm-hmm. So that's one example of a rewrite, like a major rewrite. It's like, okay, we're going to change the profession.
Yeah. I think it'd be actually interesting if we use Theta as a case study, because when you wrote Theta, you were actually following very clear plot points.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good segue into story structure, since we have we have one master writer here and somebody who actually followed the structure properly.
Yeah.
You're talking about the cat, Save the Cat.
Yeah. I followed, I can't remember the guy's name we were talking about before we started recording.
Blake Snyder.
Still can't remember. Is it Blake? No,
Save the Cat?
Not Save the Cat. No, the other one. He wrote Writer's Journey.
Oh, Writer's Journey.
Yeah. Originally, it started with his study into Joseph Campbell, doing the hero's journey, and then he studied Save the Cat, and Save the Cat is something that I think every screenwriter needs to read.
Yes,
you really need to read it. It's very much talks about structuring your script toward your audience and a producer.
Yeah, it works in multiple ways. It's mainly Save the Cat, I think, is more beneficial for somebody who's looking to sell a script.
Yes, exactly.
As opposed to doing it yourself, because one thing with me is I didn't, as I said, I didn't go to screenwriting school. I learned on my own. There are quite a few books that I had with it. Save the Cat I did pick up a little bit later, and I have written. I mean, it's actually interesting. The script that I have the best chance of selling is the script that I followed that formula to the T, which is Open Wounds, which I've told you about. My script, Open Wounds, and. So it does work. It is a great source.
So what is Save the Cat? Yeah.
Let's get into what those are. They're all based on Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. Yes. They're all based on that.
Which, if you've seen Star Wars, you pretty much know the hero's journey.
Yes. Yeah. Joseph Campbell studied tons of different things, and he did lectures for decades, about writing and story structure. And I think he came up with the fact that there's only 8 types of story.
Pretty much, yeah.
Every single story, every movie, every book you've ever every book or movie you've ever watched or read follows one of 8 story structures.
Yeah.
Okay. How they combine the others into is totally up to the writer, but when it comes down to it, you have 8 types of story. Okay. Yeah. So number 1, my first advice, stop trying to be so original when you're first starting out.
Oh yeah.
Unless you are, and I'm sure some of the people out there are, unless you are a talented, and I mean extremely naturally talented writer like Tarantino or Kevin Smith, if you are one of Stephen King, you are one of those extremely talented writers.
But I'm going to say about Tarantino didn't set out to be different. Tarantino just did what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
He just did it because he liked that kind of stuff.
Oh,
he didn't do it to
Kevin
change
Smith,
the work.
he has the brain.
Yeah,
he has this mind. He's the one in a million mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are very exceptionally talented writers.
Yeah, be original because it's something that you have in your head. Don't be original because you just want to be different than everybody
exactly.
else.
Don't
so many
try.
people do that mistake.
Don't try for it. Just write.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe you'll find out that you are one of those when you gain that confidence to just do.
But they both. I mean, Kevin Smith. I know he went to film school. He didn't graduate, but he was there for a little bit.
Yeah.
So he was probably in there for screenwriting 101. And I'm sure Tarantino read about a bazillion books and studied and broke down every script in ways that we can't even.
Tarantino
do so.
took Dove Seaman's class.
Yeah,
I was just about to talk about that, which I did too.
I had the DVDs. I watched like the first 2 of them.
Yeah.
When it was all just about getting this started. I
went to a lot of
it.
seminars. I went one with there was this writer David Freeman who does a lot of. I think he wrote a video game script and a couple of other things. Like he does a lot with that. I remember taking his seminar a few years back and applying some of those techniques in there. His seminar is more about characters.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. And one thing that's very important if you're definitely going to sell it is I always start in a log line. And I always take it from there because if you're going to pitch it to somebody, you need that log line solid. Because one of the scariest things you have to do is, okay, like I just finished a script that's 129 pages. I now have to condense that in one sentence.
Yeah. And the truth is, if you can't, then
you don't know your story.
You're not even know your story. Maybe your story is too convoluted.
Yeah.
And
if you can't bring it down to that 15 words.
Yeah.
It's what are the South Park guys, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, they have that, what is it, if, then, but.
Yeah.
If this happens, then that, but. If this happens, but this, then that. They take every one of your scenes, break them down into a couple of words. Like this happens, and then that happens because of that. If you can't break, right, what are their exact, it's a very specific order where, if you can't do that with each scene, then you're just being repetitive. Yeah. Every scene kind of has to, for lack of a better term, contradict the previous one. It has to be a result of that and then an action.
Which was a mistake I made in a lot of my earlier scripts where it was the same thing happening over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And when you get to that
end
point,
up being very repetitive.
I had to go to a point where it's like, okay, well, what's going to happen in this? And that's when you start adding subplots. And subplots are good for the story, but you don't need to talk about them in your log line.
And again, it depends on how talented of a writer you are in order to get all those subplots in there without being repetitive. We did that Blood Slaughter. I think we got repetitive because he had one kill after another, and I was using the kills as a way to just kind of span time. Like, okay, we've been chasing this killer for 3-4 days in a row, and at the end of every night was another kill. Did we actually have to see every one of those kills though? Probably not. We got it. He's been chasing this killer. Maybe we could have, but we just had some really great kill scenes, so I didn't want to cut them out.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, my short film in Station was like that because we had a scene with a serial killer and he was on his 8th victim, and we had all the victims. He has a scene where he's looking at all his victims, and we were actually toying with the idea of, okay, well, can we start? We'll do the whole process.
Yeah,
we'll start with his first victim when he decides to do it, and it could have worked. Got it. But I'm like, by the time you get to the 4th one, the audience is going to be bored to fucking death because it's the same thing over and over again. There needs to be some conflict within there. Yeah. And it's very difficult. But what you got to do is you got to make sure that the subplots find their way into the main plot, and that everything tightens together. With the scripts I've written recently, and you could still do that. I mean, this is mainly for features. I mean, you could still kind of do that in a short if you have enough characters.
Yeah, I want to. Let's focus on features.
All right, well, focusing on features.
Focusing on features.
You have to make sure everything comes together.
Okay.
There's one of the scripts that I've written and I've pitched it and I've talked to people, and one of the things that they've said about it, this is my script Open Wounds, they're like, it starts off in one place that we would never have thought it would have gone to this. And this is something that takes place in different time periods where things have happened, and it's like this whole town history. I basically wrote it based on my experiences living in a town famous for a haunted house, but nobody would ever get that reading it. It's because of my experience doing that. But everybody's like, I can't believe, when I read it, they're like, wow, there were all these little subplots going on, and they're like, I can't believe you got it all to work.
Yeah, like a Needful Things.
18 drafts later. But it's one of those things you have to make sure everything fits into the narrative. Yeah. One of the things with the script that I just finished today was I changed, the main story was there, but when I rewrote it from scratch, I changed every single subplot there was to it and made a different conflict for it. Okay. And added in new characters and new situations that I think make the script better. And then as I'm writing it, I'm realizing that this does fit into the whole thing because this is about a main character falling in love.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's a boring thing, but he needed to be around younger people. Basically there's this film class in this location, so they're learning stuff, and he's understanding what they're going through by what he didn't experience.
Okay.
He's kind of experiencing it through them, and then he kind of realizes near the end that he's looking at what they're going through, and he realizes, oh, what have I done with myself, and things like that. When he sees one of them is falling in love with a classmate, and he's having his own experience with love, he kind of looks at that person and said, you got to go what you got to go for. And when that person finally, when his student has the courage to do it and does it in this location, our main character sees it, and that's the catalyst for him to say, I need to do what I need to do now.
Yeah.
And I didn't get it to that point first. I didn't know if I was going to get there, but once I did, that's the moments where I'm happy, because I'm like, oh, everything's turning into one now, and it's all good. And so it's very rewarding when you get there, but it's one of those things where you have to pace everything well, but you got to have that main plot first, but you got to get certain things. If you're gonna have a lot of characters in, certain things need to develop with it, and it's very important for every character to have an arc. The hero's journey. That's where it comes through.
Yeah.
Luke Skywalker is the best example. He in episode 4.
Absolutely.
Another one from another perspective. To me, the two best examples of character arcs in any script are Luke Skywalker in Star Wars: New Hope.
Yeah.
And Michael Corleone in the original Godfather.
Yep.
Two best character arcs, hands down, in any film, any script you will ever read.
Well,
without question.
We can talk. Let's start with Star Wars then,
okay?
Because we can all sit here and go on and on about our own stories.
I think this is going to be another two-parter.
Yeah. Let's get into some of the technicals, the rules. Okay. And when we say rules, these are all bendable. Okay. Remember, rules are. Thank you, dog. Rules, they're not rules per se. These are guidelines. Okay. Yeah. These are things where, let's just say you're writing your first script, your second script, whatever. You're writing a script, and you're trying to figure out where to go with it and how to move this story along. Okay. Yeah. Specifically, the idea of Star Wars. Now, everybody's seen Star Wars, the first one, New Hope.
Yeah.
George Lucas followed the hero's journey to a T. He was a huge fan of Joseph Campbell.
Yeah.
And I believe he knew Joseph Campbell. He was a student of his.
Yeah, he was a student of his.
Yeah, he was an actual student of Joseph Campbell, and he wrote a story to follow the hero's journey exactly. All right?
Okay.
And as a result of that, you have, and this is what's expanded on more specifically in Save the Cat and the writer's journey, you have beats that you have to hit through the course of a script. So like if a producer is going to read your script, all right, let's say you hand your, a Hollywood producer is going to look at your script not as a script. He's going to look at it as a blueprint.
Yeah.
And certain things have to happen by certain points of the script.
Yeah.
In your first page, the first thing a producer is going to look at is how much dialogue versus action is there.
Yeah. I'm just in there for a second. What you said there, blueprint.
Yeah.
That is the one that is hands down the hardest thing for a writer to understand.
Yeah.
If you can understand that point, that is the one thing that keeps a lot of writers blocking themselves from moving forward. Is
absolutely,
you think of it as a blueprint, and I think a lot of writers that I know, they don't look at it that way.
Well, you know what it is? It's because a lot of us start off writing stories and then we move into scripts.
Yeah.
And what writers need to understand is that a story or a novel versus a script are two completely different things. Novels and short stories, and they don't have rules. You can do anything, you can go anywhere because you're invested in the character differently. You know, when it's just written word, you actually give the audience the ability to interpret things their own way in multiple different
That's
ways.
why I have difficulty writing novels, because I'm a very visual guy. In my scripts, I write a lot of visuals. I put a lot of moments in a scene.
Well, Stephen King is very visual too.
Yeah,
that's personally why I don't like many of his books. There's too much detail. I feel like some people read his books and he creates this world and they love it. Anne Rice does the same thing.
Yeah.
Creates this whole world and they can picture it. Me personally, I don't want to know all that. I kind of want to fill in those details when I'm reading something, you know? But that's also why a lot of his stories do translate pretty well into film.
Yeah.
The problem is a lot of his endings don't translate to film well because it's so detailed from this point from the beginning to the end. There's so much detail. By the time you get to an end of a Stephen King book, there's no other way that it could have ended. But in a film, you're limited to what you can physically show on screen.
But you just explained the reason why his film adaptations are so successful.
Yeah.
Because he pretty much puts all the work in there in the novel form.
He does.
You know, it's like, you know, adapting a Stephen King script, it's funny because there's some people that say, oh, I'd love to adapt a Stephen King script. I would be terrified to do so, just in the fact that
there's so much to
because
it.
There's so much there.
Yeah.
And
it takes a lot to know where to cut.
It does. And you know, look, he hated The Shining, Stephen King, because Kubrick.
You know what? I think that started because Stephen King had written his own script treatment for it.
Yeah.
And Kubrick said, nope, I don't want. He didn't even look at it.
Yeah.
He didn't want anything.
From a writing standpoint, you got to understand what King was at the time. He just became successful at the time.
Yeah.
So that's probably King's ego going, well, you know, who is he to mess with my vision?
Yeah. And he still feels the same.
Like, I don't give a shit.
He still feels the same. Oh no, he's even more so. He's
not
very much
with
like
some
that.
other things. He's a little bit more protective of his brand, yes, but I think he's a little bit more laid back in terms of certain things. He's like, let some of the directors, you know, do their thing, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, he'll be disappointed in some areas, but you know, it's funny when you look at some of his favorite adaptations are, and you know what are some of his favorites.
I think he just really likes Frank Darabont. That's what it is. I think that they're just really
Darabont's in a class all
yeah.
himself.
I think that they're really just good friends, and he's like, you know what, you do whatever you want. I trust you, and he just kind of gives him, oh, you want to do another one of my movies? Go for it, have fun, and do another book.
Yeah.
Here,
Darabont did
I'm
the dollar
this,
short.
Take it.
That's why King has the dollar short, and Darabont probably is the best example from that because his dollar short lost his career.
That's really cool. For anybody who doesn't know this, Stephen King does the dollar shorts.
He still does it.
He still does it. Yeah. Where you can, if you are a student, he has to be a student. You
has to be a student.
You have to be a student filmmaker.
Yeah.
You can contact Stephen King, and he will sell you the rights to turn one of his short stories, not his novels, his short stories into a script for $1.
Yes.
Okay. You can't put it online. You can't sell it. You can't do film festivals. You can't do anything with it. Yeah. You can't do anything where you're going to get any sort of real notoriety for it. But he wants to allow you to take an actual good story that's
a formatted story,
a formatted, well-written story, and make your first film with it. So you have to be a student. He's got other little rules here and there, but if you contact him about it, he will let you. There actually is one film festival called, I think it's called the Dollar Shorts Festival, where it's the only one you're allowed to put them in, you know.
And he helps run it. He picks the best one.
I think there's even a time limit onto how long the film can be.
Yes,
you know,
but that's where Darabont started. But that's a good example of adaptation. I mean, one of the things I've read on a lot of it, you know, if you go to Masterclass, Aaron Sorkin, who is a very good writer, he wrote A Few Good Men, The Social Network, which is a film.
There's a lot of TV stuff too.
Yeah, but Social Network is a film that has no business being as good as it is. It's a film about Facebook, and it's riveting. You know, it's one of my favorite films this decade.
Oh wow!
You know, and it's like, you know, that's somebody you want to learn from if he's you know, and he's great at adaptation. And you know, one of his classes he talks about that. And for one of the assignments that he gives is you take any story that you want, a public domain story, and you write 10 pages of an adaptation. Okay. You know, and I chose Edgar Allan Poe's The Oval Portrait, which is a 2-page.
Okay.
It's a 2-page poem, and I wrote that into a 1010-page adaptation. Which you know, I didn't think about budget and everything like that. I went for it, and I would like to do it. I just need $100,000.
There's something a lot of people.
So if there's anybody out there who has $100,000 and is a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe,
well, there's something that a lot of start out filmmakers can do. Even if you can't come up with an idea for a script, instead of racking your brain to try to write something good, there's tons of stories out there that are public domain.
How many people do Dracula and Frankenstein?
Exactly. You can take those, and just because Universal owns the character, they don't own the book. Dracula, Frankenstein, those are Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft. You know, I think H.G. Wells.
Yeah,
a lot of these old stories. Anything before like 1920. Anything written before like 1920 or 1925 is public domain. Yeah. Exactly. They're all public domain. Take one of those stories and just adapt it, make it yourself. It doesn't have to be a great story. The whole point is it doesn't have to be a great adaptation. The movie itself doesn't have to be wonderful. The whole point is to get yourself making a movie.
And to get your mind wrapped around what a story should look like and feel like. And
exactly. How to tell a story through the course of a film.
Yeah. I mean, everybody... you know, the greatest writer of all is probably Shakespeare. Yeah. And a lot of people do adaptations of his work.
His stories have been done so many times you can't even count
Yeah.
How many times Romeo and Juliet has been redone?
Yeah, but you know how many times they use that as a structure for their own original work? A lot of writers do that as their own structure.
Absolutely.
So, I mean,
but even his story, I keep calling them movies, even his stories are not originals. He took them all, his greatest stories were not originals. They were all something he based it on other stories.
Usually like the Greek tragedies. And
Which is where Joseph Campbell gets it all from. Yeah. Everything that he writes now, everything that Joseph Campbell talked about is all based on Greek tragedies and Greek romance.
Do yourself a favor, go back and read the Greek tragedies. Read the classic stories.
Those are the beginning.
They're the beginning.
Basis.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of good screenwriting books out there.
Absolutely.
Those
that you should read.
Absolutely. But read fiction,
what are some
nonfiction.
of your favorite screenwriting books?
Well, for screenwriting,
yes.
Particular, the first one that I picked up when I did it was simply called Screenplay by Sid Field.
Okay. That's that one. Like everybody
has. I mean,
every screenwriter I've ever met says is Sid Field.
Yeah, and he does. I think Blake does the, Save the Cat. They do the same thing with Beats. I think Blake does it in a more modern way.
Yeah, like you said, it's
in a more entertaining way, but it's
more
pretty
to
much
tell you how to sell it.
Yeah, it's the same thing, and there's a lot. And with Sid Field, he talks a lot about, certain scripts today that are good and follow the beats. Save the Cat, I belong to the website. Because I have a Save the Cat website, and what I get is I get beat sheets for popular films that come out, even though Blake Snyder's no longer with us. He has a team of people that put it together.
Right.
I mean, one of my favorite films of all time is Silence of the Lambs, and he did one of that recently. Which is
that's cool.
That film should be studied like everywhere. It's such a brilliant film on many levels. But I would, Save the Cat, I would recommend.
So what are the beats that since you read a lot, since it sounds like you read those from time to time?
Well, I haven't read them in a while, so it's hard for me to,
What are some of the beats that we're looking for in a screenplay? When you're writing your screenplay, you're going to look at it as a thing.
Yeah.
Not as your story anymore. Now your screenplay is done.
Well,
and you want to look at it as a thing. What are those beats that need to be hit?
Well, I believe it's like it's very specific in Blake Snyder's way, where it's like the first 10 to 15 pages set up the conflict. It sets up everything, sets up the characters, and then from like 15 to 25, it's the conflict begins, and then you end the first act on the first moment of that conflict, and then the second act, which is twice as long, you have certain beats where it's like, okay, so, the hero is dealing with it, you get information on it, and then you kind of hit that point where the hero's down, the hero's devastated, everything's going bung, and that's when you begin the third act, which is usually around page 70 or 80, and then you bring it back together, and that's the last thing for like the last 15, 20 pages. It's in just about every script,
Yeah,
he gets it down to the T though in terms of writing, because that, it's like that's how you sell it.
Here's what we're talking about. Here, give you the specific examples in Star Wars. One of the rules is by 60 minutes into your film, which would be technically 60 pages, you're going to average out 1 page per minute. Now, it's not going to translate exactly that way, but when you average the entire film, generally 1 page per minute of film. Again, the 2 pages of dialogue comes out to 1 minute, but half a page of action comes out to 1 minute. So you average it out. So essentially, page 60 you want is the point of no return.
Yeah.
That's what we call this.
Much,
you call it the point of no return. And one of two things has to happen. Either one of your main characters has to die by that point, which is going to make your main protagonist realize that.
Now, that's based on a 120-page script.
Essentially.
On a 90-page script, you can go down to 50. Between 50 and 55.
No, yes and no. 60 minutes is it. It has to happen by 60 minutes. It has to happen
within that way.
Even if you have a 3-hour film, it has to happen by 60 minutes. And then when you hit 120 minutes, it has to happen again.
Yeah.
You have to do it again every 60 minutes. If you go beyond 60 minutes, like the first Avengers film, everybody will say, and all the reviews said the same thing about the first Avengers film. The beginning of the movie is really slow, and it takes a lot of build up, and then the second half gets great. And that's because they had so many characters to introduce. Yeah. They actually didn't hit that point till about an hour 10, an hour 15. Yeah. And because it took them that extra 10 or 15 minutes, the audience felt like it took too long to get somewhere. Yeah. Now, it was important. It was very important to the story to tell all of that, and they cut about 20, 25 minutes out of that first hour to get it down to an hour 15.
I know.
Before that turning point happened. Yeah. But that's just proof your audience will feel a little bored. Now, it's not going to ruin your film, but it's going to make them feel like, okay, when are we going to get somewhere with this? Yeah. So by 60 minutes, you need to have that point of no return. And where we said either a main character that you've cared about and followed is going to die.
Yeah.
Or if you're not going to do that, you have to have the biggest action sequence of the entire film. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's what's got to happen by 60 pages. And let's say you give your script to a producer, he's going to turn to page 60 and say, what's happening here?
Yeah. Well, that's once they read the script. There's so many.
Yes,
for a real producer, there's many steps that you have to go through.
Of course there is. Well, this is just one of those things.
He's at the point where he's reading industry standards that they know
one of those
to look
industry
for.
standards. Yeah,
exactly.
And like I said, the first page is going to look for all dialogue. He wants 75% dialogue in that opening page, and at the end of that first page, something that last line has to be enough to make him want to turn the page. If he's not going to want to turn that page, that's it. If he's not interested by the end of your first page, throw it in. That's it. I'm not moving forward. Yeah. And they do it again at 10 pages and 15 pages.
Yeah, there's a 60. Certain beat that you have to do with it. That, it happens with it. No,
I think it's at the 75 page, 75 is where you said is where we have to up the stakes for your main protagonist, where something has to happen where now things just got a whole lot worse. Mm-hmm. And that's could be another death, or suddenly the mortality of the situation is presented to him.
It's usually represented by death of a character.
Yes.
In terms of, in horror, it's definitely, but it's funny when you do like a slasher film, these rules kind of go a little bit out the window, but you still, in a way, yes, but no, because it's always around that point in a slasher film where the character that you resonate with the most gets killed.
Yes.
So it's like that's, a lot of it's just filler, but there's usually that one character who stands out that when it gets to that point, and you think it's going to be about that, that's where it's going to, that's where they're going to get killed. I think one of the better examples is the first Friday the 13th when I think it was Brenda, when she was out in the archery field. You kind of thought, she's like alone. It's like, everybody else is getting killed, but even though they were centered on Alice, you kind of thought maybe you didn't know who was going to be the final one in it. Like you didn't know who was going to be next. So even though they focused on Alice a little bit, they did also focus on her a little bit. So when she gets killed, remember that's off screen.
Yeah.
So
it still matters.
It matters because that was somebody. Because what does she do? She hears somebody crying out and she goes to help them.
Yeah.
In that moment, and it's funny because I always think back to that. When it happens, of course, Nightmare on Elm Street, Johnny Depp gets killed right at that point.
Yep.
So, it can work in everything, for that.
Millennium Falcon lands on the Death Star at 60 minutes into Star Wars is when the Millennium Falcon lands down. Point of no return. That's it. We're here.
We made it.
We're here now.
There is no changing our minds at this moment.
The Godfather,
can't just take off.
It's a little bit different with The Godfather because they had the whole wedding scene at the beginning, but really at that moment in it is when Michael shoots the police captain and the other mob boss. That's that moment when that happens.
Speed. An hour in is the bus jumping the bridge. Now, something funny about Speed, they wrote the action sequences first for that film. Before they wrote the script,
and then they wrote the story around them.
They wrote it around.
I've done it where I've written scenes out of things like
they had certain things they wanted to shoot. Like, okay, we're gonna have this bus jump this. We're gonna have this. We're gonna have that. And then they gave it to the screenwriter and said, "Here, this is what's gonna happen at 45 minutes. This has to happen at 60. This happens at 120. This happens."
But I have to have a disclaimer here. I just feel like I have to. We're talking about experienced screenwriters.
Yes.
Here. We did something similar with Blood Slaughter, and I think it caused a lot more problems than it helped. With Blood Slaughter, we actually created a series of fake trailers first. So we had the entire story laid out in these trailers, and we knew we wanted the story to go, and it really helped on the production end where we kind of were shooting the same shots that we shot the first time.
Yeah,
because we knew
extending
what worked.
them. Yeah.
But from a writing level, we wrote a script and tried to wrap it around those two trailers.
Well, I think the real problem with Blood Slaughter was we took 3 stories and combined it into one.
Yes.
Okay. The first trailer is only like a minute and a half. and that we use that as the precursor, the opening scenes of the movie.
Yeah.
We turned that into the first 10 minutes of the film.
Yeah. Sounds like you two really liked Grindhouse.
I loved it. Absolutely.
Just a little.
And then
I didn't walk out to Terry
did,
Darling's music at my wedding.
Yeah.
And then we took the trailer for Bloodslaughter 2, which is the detective chasing the killer, and turned that into the first hour of the film, hour 15 of the film. And then we took the third trailer, which is supposed to be a slumber party massacre, and we made that the end of the film. And that's where our problem was. We should have, the first movie, the first trailer was just nothing. It was just this killer, so we should have kept 1 and 2, those two trailers, as one film, and then made an entirely separate film for part 3. And that's where we went wrong. We just put too much into one film.
I'm going to tell you
overthought it.
A funny story about when you go a little too far on scripts.
Okay.
Because somebody I know, he was working on a film. It never got made, but they were doing a trailer for it. And I won't name the title. I won't name anything with it. But I'm reading a script because I got the full script and I'm reading it. And they were going to do like the best scenes from it, put the trailer up, do an Indiegogo on it and everything like that. And it was pretty much a violent, misogynistic.
Like most are.
Yeah.
Like most are, which I'm okay. But the amount of detail that went into, like, in terms of each kill and each thing, it was like setting up where it's like, oh, the victim is tied this way. And, and it was like, it's like, they're using like, they're going to like what fabric they're using or what, like what they're wearing. And
it's
I'm
like
going
a Stephen King
like through the whole detail and everything.
In the script?
This is in the script.
Wow.
And
simplify your script,
and
people.
I told the director, and he's like, what do you think? I said, first off, I can't believe you're doing this. And second, the script was 120 pages. And I'm like, this script is going to end up being 39 minutes long.
Yeah. You could have turned the script into 45 minutes.
It's ridiculous.
45
and
pages.
Then the irony is that when they were done, the film was 54 minutes.
Jesus. Yeah.
Simplify
your
script.
How in the world does that happen?
Yeah, and I
because
I pretty much called
so
it.
Detailed. It's so detailed.
Exactly. You end up spending an entire half a page describing what the character is wearing. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This is something that you do in production, and you make those decisions. Your actor, remember, what has to be in your script is simply what the actor needs to do the scene. The actor doesn't care what he's wearing, or the actor doesn't need what his outfit is. Once he puts the outfit on, he's going to feel it, and that's going to create the character. When you're writing your script, simplify it. As little details as possible. Leave a lot open to interpretation, and focus on telling the story, not telling the room.
Well, the script I just finished. There's a couple of scenes that take place in the 1950s, and I put down the person's wearing 1950s clothes. That's all I put. And even somebody looked at me. They're like, "Well, how come you're not detailed?" I said, "That's that's for the costume designer. When you hire the costume designer,
the actor doesn't need to know that.
The actor doesn't need to know that. They know that they're dressed for the era, and that's it. That's it. That's what they're doing. And
they need to know it's 1950s clothes so that they know what they're going to bring to that character. Exactly. Like, are we doing this as say it's a crime drama? There's a big difference between a Cary Grant crime drama and an Anthony Hopkins crime drama.
Yeah. Well, this
These
is
are two
one of those
entirely different styles of film.
This is one of those things where it actually takes place. There's a filming of a movie serial, which I did a lot of research on, and I actually talked to a few people, like sons of serials doing this, and got my research on. And that's one thing. If you're doing anything fact-based, you got to do your research on it. If you're doing something original, or you want to say original, you don't need to check your resources as much. All right. And this is a lesson I actually learned in person from David Mamet. When I interviewed him about a movie he did called Red Belt, and I said, what was the purpose of this one thing that you did? He's like, oh, I made it up. Yeah. It's bullshit. He's like, it's bullshit. Yeah. But he made it sound so authentic that you believed it.
Right.
And he's like, there's something wrong with making shit up. It's like,
I just listened to an interview with Chris Nolan. They were talking about Interstellar. Yeah. And a lot of people got on them about the science of Interstellar. Okay. Yeah. What he did was he actually had a science advisor on it. Okay. And And so when they went through all of the quantum mechanics and the quantum physics in the film, they were trying to get very, very realistic. He wanted to follow it as much as possible, but the science of it, they get to certain points, and Nolan says, well, there's certain points where, okay, reality is insane. Yeah. Reality, what he said, he even said it. He's like, what quantum science will actually theorize can happen is so much crazier than what you can imagine. Okay. Yeah. But because of that, you have to take some liberties, because if you're going to go into what can really happen, you're going to end up with a 7-hour movie to explain all of that. He's like, so you have to take some liberties. You have to change a few things. So what they did was when they went through it, the advisor would sit and tell him, okay, well, based on this, quantum science says this is possible, that's possible. And he just went for the one that can be told the most coherently. So while the science is science, it's a science, you know, but quantum science is really not. It's all theory. Okay.
It is.
And so people were looking at the film in that way of like, well, is this even possible? Quantum science says it is. It's not likely, but it's totally possible. And he went in that direction with it. Like, all right, let's just go with what's possible, not what's probable.
Yeah. Well, I kind of did something similar because I kind of went through that in the script I'm doing. This is the same one with the serial, and there's like this whole quantum thing and dream states and everything like that.
I love that stuff.
I did all my interpretation on it, but I'm like, at the end of the day, I just went, it's just better if I make it up in a way. It's like, you know, get everything there. And when I first wrote it, I had this whole convoluted sequence where the main characters are getting their brain analyzed and everything like that. And I'm like, this is just taking way too long and everybody's going to get bored. So one of the subplots is that there's a student character who everybody thinks is a bit of a dimwit. You know, he's doing like, he's like the jack of all trades guy. He's like, you know, everybody doesn't respect him and they don't think he's like bright enough. He's like doing, you know, they think he's doing this for extra credit. And when it comes to a point where they're trying to talk about this whole thing, all of a sudden he just blurts out this whole thing. It's like a whole page of dialogue about the whole theory and everything like that. And at the end, he follows it up and talks to his professor. He said, so how's that for exposition for you? And I'm just like, I just solved 20 pages in this one bit of dialogue where now it's like, and then I'm realizing, you know what? You don't have to get detailed on every single one, because instead of people thinking about the science of it, they're just wondering, how in the hell does this person who we know, you know, how is he able to do this? And at the end, they're like, how do you know this? He's like, oh, I read Doctor Strange. You know, and it's just like, that's all you need. It's like, you don't need to go, you know, knowing
he doesn't have to be a scholar to do it. He read a comic book.
Don't. And it's funny because I've seen people who go into that detail of research where it can help, but at the end of the day, we're just creating. Yeah, you know.
See, that's one of the problems I'm coming across now with my script that I'm working on, is that there's a very supernatural twist to it, and I'm struggling because I'm not like a supernatural kind of person.
See, I'm good with that.
I'm too grounded, so I'm trying to put more and more like logic and thought and science into things.
We have an audience member who disagrees with the supernatural.
She's like, "Shut up already about yourselves."
No, but
so like that's one of the big things I'm struggling with. But I think what I'm getting from this conversation is that, you know, as long as the story is following certain beats, like, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. As long as you're hitting a good story and you're hitting your marks, then if the supernatural kind of works around that, as long as you're getting a little bit of the supernatural, but you're getting the story that you need, it'll be more accepted.
Yeah. I mean, you always run the risk
of confusing the audience if you get too detailed as well. You could bore them. You could totally bore them with science, because a lot of people, like you said, you're not you didn't say this, but I know you're not big on science. You're not a science person. So sitting there having somebody like, I love Altered States. Yeah. She likes it.
I like it.
But that scene where William Hurt is where they're all sitting in the restaurant, in the bar, and he's explaining how they're going to find the self, and it's all in, you know, and he goes through all that, like, she has no interest in that. Me, I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. I love it because it's real. Yeah. It's the real science that these doctors in the 70s were trying to explain. Yeah, you know, and all that goes. It goes back to the hippocampus and the hypothalamus and all the different parts of the brain and where the self exists. Well, it's one of the bringing things, the God particle and all that shit. It doesn't interest her.
I write all over the place. It basically comes to what I can think of. But if I really sit down and think about the stories that I want to tell, a lot of it involves around the human psyche and a lot of true. It's weird. In some cases, it's more like true crime in a way. Like, I always wonder what makes people tick the way they do, not just in murder, but why do people like this? Why do they have like fetishes for this? Why do they have desires for this?
I like that kind of stuff. I'm a people person.
and I always explore that. You know, it's like, you know, I wrote a thing where a character, where one of the side things is a character likes to recreate movie scenes with photos, like old movie scenes, and it's just like, it's, you know, and it's like, you know, I could have taken it to a much more perverted direction if I wanted to, but it's like, this is what this guy likes, and it fit in with the story that what I'm doing. But, you know, it's like, I wonder what makes people tick. When I did Insatiable, it was like, okay, why is this guy doing what he's doing? And this was a guy who longed to be a vampire and everything like that. And in the end of the film, his next victim turns out to be a real vampire who turns the tables, but it's like, you got to get into like what makes people tick like that, why people are like that. And, when a lot of it comes with my job in television, I worked with a lot of serial true crime shows where I saw a lot of personality and the psyches of them.
I just geeked out a little.
So it's like, so I've learned a lot from there. And that's where I try to bring it in, and because you try to give it more of a realistic point of view. See, for that, I think you kind of need a little bit more of a realistic view with it. It's why I love Behind the Mask, because it did that for 2 acts, and then it just turned it on its head and became a genre film,
right?
In its last 30 minutes,
and that's her kind of thing. That pure reality, like to her, reality is the scariest thing.
It is to me. That's more scary, and I love Supernatural because I do believe it's like I love those two things. It's like and I try to incorporate that as much as I can. My script Open Wounds mixes both.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do right now.
And that's not it's not an easy thing to do. No. It's like, and I'll say it, my script starts with a school shooting. Wow. And a lot of people are like, wow, I don't know if I want to touch this. And it goes from that to a completely supernatural reason. But it's weird because, like you said, you got to be psychic. And it's like, without realizing it, you kind of become topical without becoming topical.
Yeah.
It's like one of the stories I'm writing is about a guy who kind of starts going on a downward spiral from losing his job, and it's a little bit more of a science fiction realm. Mm-hmm. But I was kind of basing it on things that I've been experiencing with my work and my job, and taking it into like a video game world.
You're writing what you know. You're writing what's happening.
What's interesting is like I'm writing it, and I'm basing it off myself, and I'm like, this is Taxi Driver in a video game. And then all of a sudden, I'm looking around, and I'm like, what would make this more interesting if I made the main character African American? Mm-hmm. And that's all I did, and that's all I changed with it. And I'm like, and I was talking to somebody about that, and it's like, I grew up in Amityville, which is mainly a minority town, so but it challenged me because I don't know that that much, so it's challenging me. I'm like, this is where the challenge is coming from.
That's what I'm doing too.
Yeah,
I'm writing like the opposite of myself.
Yeah,
I'm writing about. I'm writing a story about a woman who was dying to have a baby, and I'm like, that is so the opposite of me. Like, I don't even like to even like wrap myself around.
I can give you people to talk to about that. I know some people. It's like,
I might pull you up on that, because it's like, I know people, and I know lots of people. Who,
see, this all goes back to the bagel and the hand job. I'm telling you, this all goes back. Hand job in a cup. But
my most recent stories are like that, though, are very like, it can be male, it can be female, and I just writing the story for the character, and then I'm not making it very specific. Yeah, in the script, like one of my scripts, I have a girl talking to her boyfriend on the phone. But it could be a girl talking to her girlfriend, or a guy talking to his husband, or it could be a boy talking to his girl. It could go in. It's not specific in that, So that's my way right now of, as I'm writing this. Okay, I want to just focus on getting a good story, and then when we go into casting, I want to look at it like anybody can play this character.
You're writing it to your strengths, or your strengths in production.
Exactly.
Going back to the artistic,
then letting the actor create it.
Going back to the artistic thing with short films, I used to work with somebody who used to like give me an email. He's like, he would send me like 3 photos, and he'd be like, can you make a story out of this? And then an hour later, I'd give him like a 3-page script, and he would be like, how in the hell can you do this? I said, this is a strength of mine.
Yeah.
I said, you have a strength somewhere else. Unfortunately, it turned out to be annoying people, but no, I'm kidding. But I said, you have your strength, and this is that. But it's like,
but those are really excellent writing exercises.
Yeah. When we were doing In Fear of, when we were premiering it somewhere, somebody came up to me and he's like, telling me this goes back to the resources thing of what you have, and he's like, well, I know somebody who owns a B-52 fighter plane.
What can we do with that?
And we're at lunch, and everybody's like talking, yupping it up, and I always carry a notepad with me, like a notebook with me, like a spiral notebook and a pen. Mm-hmm. Everybody who sees me at conventions, they wonder what's in my book bag.
Do that. Everybody keep a notepad with you at all times.
I always have one with me, and I always spend like an hour or two writing something down. I'm not stealing it from anybody, but the atmosphere always.
It's an experience. It's something that you could. If you don't write it down, like, this is really good. If you don't write it down, I guarantee by tomorrow you're going to forget it.
Yeah,
you're going to forget. Like, well, what exactly were we talking about? I don't know.
Exactly. But we were having this conversation, and this one friend of mine, he's like, well, I have a B-52 bomber, and I just started writing, and people are like, oh, you're not really talking to us. What's going on? And at the end of the dinner, I had a whole concept for an episode, like right there. And I told him, I said, B-52 fighter. Okay. Veteran during the war, got stuck in a plane crashed, got stuck in there full of dead bodies. Has not flown since. His son goes to an air show to try to convince him and books him a flight to get on it, and it all happens again. Wow. And that was just from somebody saying,
very Twilight Zone.
Oh, of course. I mean, but it's like, it's like that I got from just somebody saying, I have a plane.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've been trying to pitch Infura for television, and we have all these episode ideas, and that's one of them, and that's one of them in there. And it's like, I've written the script for it already, just, for it. And but for that, it's like, you have to have the beats,
of course.
And for television, it's a little bit different. I'm more of a feature writer, not a television writer, but that's a whole different story whatsoever. These books help with film, not television, because you still have to keep the structure in television, but you have to format it precisely because you're dealing with advertising on that medium. Even when you're dealing with Netflix, even though Netflix is you still have to do. Well,
Netflix now, because of Netflix and Amazon and the fact of not having commercial breaks anymore. Yeah. The stories, these shows, they follow them. They follow them somewhat.
Have that whole climax at the scene.
Of course,
they go to black and they go to the next scene.
But not as strictly anymore. It's not like it's still there because there are no commercial breaks anymore, so you don't have to have that cliffhanger every 7.5 to 9.5 minutes.
They still do it though.
They do it.
They
do it because it keeps it interesting.
Well, I mean, it's also
not because of the commercial standpoint, because of the story.
It keeps the story contained to an hour.
Yeah,
it's an easy way of doing that. What were we saying? What you said earlier? We never got to that. The Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Yeah.
What was it that they said? What is their actual process?
I remember they're going Rob Schneider, dip-a-dip, and dip-a-dip.
What they're talking about, it's a simple rule for rewriting and improving the story.
Yeah,
they call it the rules of replacing ands with either buts or therefores.
There you go.
Okay.
He says a lot of writers fall into the trap of describing actions and events in a typical this happened and then this happened and then this happened and then that happened.
If it's then it's okay. Well, when do we get somewhere? Because this happens and then that happens. And then that happens.
It's not engaging. It's just kind of creating a list of things that happened. So he says his approach to writing or even speaking is to generate momentum. You do that by going back and saying this happened, therefore this happened, but then this happened.
Yeah.
It's much more engaging that way.
By every action, creating a reaction.
Yeah.
Every single scene has to lead into the next one, not in a form of just, well, he's going to go here and then he's going to go there and then he's going to go there. You know, like, I mean, we know filmmakers who do that, where their scenes there's two characters walk onto a frame, they talk about something, then they walk out of frame. Next scene, they're walking into frame again. It's like, okay, well, where are we going? Yeah. Why didn't you just condense those 4 scenes in a row of them walking on and then walking off? Condense it into one scene. Cut that down. Make one scene out of it and then go somewhere else with it. Go to another character. Go to an entirely different location where maybe they're already there. They're in the middle of something. Make it reactionary.
I always, when I do that, in every script I do, I always start in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah. I do that all the time. I feel
like you just have to. Yeah. It's just
because you know what? I think when you have 2 characters, they're real people.
Well, here's what it is.
Every character is not going to start a conversation with "Hi, Scott, how are you? It's nice seeing you today."
But most of it is you start the middle of a conversation because you've already set up what the conversation is going to be about in the previous scene, and so many people do that. Where it's like and I've been guilty of this myself. Mm-hmm. You explain the situation, you see the situation happen, and I kind of call it the clue Tim Curry method, where it's just like, you know where I'm going with this, where it's just like you're just reenacting everything you did. Now, everybody's not Tim Curry, and he does that great.
But that's what made it funny. The fact that we just watched this for an hour and a half, and now
he just reenacted it
in
for
2
us
minutes
to do it.
We're going to go through the whole thing.
But that was brilliant.
Yes, and that's what made it comedy.
But you can't do that all the time.
No.
And it's better if you do it. It's just like, it's like in one thing, I have a character who comes up with this idea to settle the conflict. And the next star, it's not going to be like, "Hi, how are you? Hi, I'm fine. Listen, I have something."
People don't do
fuck that. You just go with the person's reacting, going, "That is the dumbest fucking idea I've ever heard." Now you're onto something. Now you're like, "Okay, now we can go with this."
Especially like crazy artist types, where it's like, we'll pick up a conversation we were having 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, we got to start wrapping this up. So let's get into real quick. Let's recap what we've gone through. Okay.
Filmmaking sucks.
Yes. But we love it anyway. So when you're writing your script, keep in mind of the beats. Yes. Number one, keep in mind of your beats. Make sure that every scene is a reaction to the one before it. Yeah. Okay. If you feel that you have to start the scene off with your characters introducing what's happening, then you're not telling your story properly.
Now,
keep in mind when you're writing that you're going to have visual cues in the scene. Don't have your characters talk about what they're looking at.
Yeah.
You know, like it doesn't, you see what we're showing the audience. Get into them talking about what's happening,
There's a
not
few
what they're
steps before
seeing.
you even get to that, because even before you write the script, you still have to keep the beats in.
Yeah.
You know, there's a certain way that I go about it. You know, you can go right in and write a script. That's great. All right. I have a couple of things that I do first.
Okay.
You know, the first thing I do is a log line. Then I start building the characters.
Well, what's a log line right off the bat?
Log line is just basically one or two sentences explaining the story in a nutshell.
Okay.
You know, this is the if, but
it gives you your protagonist.
Gives you your protagonist. It gives you the whole setting of it.
Essentially, because I just started studying log lines, like how to make a good one.
It's very important.
It's very important to get your entire film told down into one sentence. It's you're naming your protagonist, you're naming their conflict. Sometimes you name the antagonist in it and the goal of the conflict.
Yeah.
Okay. What is their end goal with it? I think with Data States, I wrote a long-term insomniac goes to see a I can't even remember what I wrote. As I wrote this like a year ago at this point. A long-term
guy's fucked up, tries to fix it, gets more fucked up.
Something like that. You know, a long-term insomniac goes to see an enigmatic doctor about his affliction and realizes that something has returned from his dreams. Boom.
Guy's fucked up, tries to get fixed, end up more fucked up. That's basically every log line that you'll ever read.
Yes,
pretty much. I mean,
in your
that's
log
the hero's
line,
journey in a nutshell.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
you know, so in your log line, you don't have to name your character. Just this is your character. What is your character?
I do think, even though the actor does build it, I do think it is important to come up with some kind of background for the character. Like,
of course,
quirks. What are their? You know, you have to have certain things with that. This is something I learned.
Well, that's a matter of director and actor, because some actors want to create it themselves.
It is,
other actors want it to be told to them.
But it's good to have a basis in the script, because they need that arc too. Because the build up of the characters is going to help with their own personal arc.
Well, even so, that's production. That's production. We're talking writing here.
With writing dialogue.
It does. It helps tremendously in writing dialogue.
Yes.
That's what I actually do. That I make a list. I do like a character list, and what I do is I take all the main characters that I have. You know, first I write a log line, then I write a scriptment where I have the characters' names, but I put. You know, I have the characters' names of what I want, okay? I know what my beginning and I know my end. You have to have those. So I have those, okay? Then
I found that if I don't have an ending, I can't finish I can't move forward.
Sometimes
I have to know where it's going before
I'll go with it. But that usually comes when I write what I write. You know, they say it's a treatment. I call it a scriptment. And what I do,
those are two different things. A
scriptment is you're writing the script, you're putting the scene heading, you're putting in everything. But instead of dialogue, you're describing what's happening from pace to pace.
As though you were going to improv the scene.
Yes,
yes.
All right?
Writing the scene out as though you were going to let your actors.
And that's just at that point. That's where I have a list.
The
of
Joe
characters.
Swanberg method.
I put their name, their age, usually their occupation and their background and what they're looking for. And I put that all in like 1 or 2 pages, and that's usually like the main 7 or 8 characters depending on what the script is. Then from there I write the scriptment, then I get the scriptment down, and then usually I write the first draft freehand.
Okay.
In a notebook. Usually when people start
Our
reading
brains work so alike, it's so funny.
When people
I can't do drafts.
It's weird. I very rarely finish it, because once I get to the third act, when I'm writing a freehand, I start writing the script.
Well,
immediately.
And that's fine. I'm like,
I know where I need to go.
That's sort of my process.
I'm just trying to let the audience realize that there is no right or wrong way to write.
When I show people,
you don't have to do it this way or this way.
No.
You write it that way.
This is the way I do it. You don't have to do it my way. I have a couple of notes. This is what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah. I write a couple of notes. I'll have maybe a page of notes handwritten as I'm just, and then I'll get into the script. But I can't write. I really can't get anywhere in the script until I know where it's going to end. I have to have my ending. But that's me.
For the most part, I do, but there's some cases where I don't, because I'll have an ending and then I'm writing it and 2/3 in, I change it because of the way things are going. Which is fine. But when I start writing my draft, when I tell people, okay, it's my first draft, it's really my 5th. When they start seeing it, and I just don't tell them that. So.
I'm very similar, and it's funny. I was as I was writing this one out, I've written it, like I said, for 3 or 4 years. I've written different scriptments for it, and adjusting and kind of evolving it from there. And then I introduced a character that I wasn't expecting to introduce.
Yeah.
And I introduced her mother, the character's mother. And I kind of stopped
Changed
myself.
the whole dynamic.
Yeah, I changed the whole dynamic, and I stopped myself, and I said, okay, well, I'm about to write dialogue between two women. And, that's a very complicated relationship, a mother and a daughter. And I went back and I actually jotted down about a page worth of notes about my main character, where she came from, gave her a backstory. And through that, I kind of created a reason why she was that way. Yeah. And it all stemmed back from her mother. So by creating that kind of history and how their relationship was developed as when she was a child, I then had a voice to write their dialogue in.
Yeah.
Where, two women share this unique experience, and that's where how they interact with each other was coming from.
Now, you don't actually have to have that in the script either, where it came from.
No.
It doesn't have to be
it's just
there. It's
how they respond to each other.
Yeah. So you don't have to, so don't think of it in the terms where, well, we have to explain this to the audience. No, you don't have to.
No.
If it's not important to the story immediately, then all it's doing is creating your character's temperament.
Yeah.
You don't need to explain to the audience why they have that temperament unless it's important to the story itself.
Right.
That's what creates the character, is understanding where they're coming from. Let the again, unless it's important.
You need to let the audience breathe.
Yes, exactly. You got to let the audience.
You got to let them breathe.
Take
and so many
into this
and a lot of mistakes a lot of young writers, directors, and they do is they don't let the audience breathe.
Yeah.
My Fear of the Dark episode of In Fear of, which is for the first season, is basically all it is a woman in a house during a thunderstorm. The power's out and the candles are going out one by one. And at the end of the film, you find out somebody's in the room with her, and that's all I show. There's somebody in the room with her with one last candle, and she screams. The last candle blows out. Okay. I've had people tell me, like, is that a ghost or is that an intruder? And I go, what do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, but they're like, well, tell me, what is it? And I'm like, no. That's for you to decide.
For you to figure it out.
That's
what we do with mastectomy.
I remember I had a conversation with somebody else about In Fear of. It's like, well, you really should give a definitive answer. And I'm like, why? Yeah. It's their answer to it. Yeah. And a lot of people get so selfish with their work, and again, this is something that took me a very long time to deal with. It's like, you need to relate to an audience, and you have to think while you're writing it for yourself. The main reason why you're writing for something is you got to know what an audience is going to think, because you want that audience to react. Yeah. Film critics, for screenwriting for film and everything. That's why Roger Ebert was always my favorite, because he always critiqued films on his personal opinion, but then he'd always be like, well, what would an audience be? He would always look at himself outside of his realm as an audience member and think of the general audience member, and he'd be like, okay, I could see why they did this and did that. And then he goes and nitpicks because he is a film snob after all. Right. He always was, and I'm saying that in a good way. It's a good way. He was a good example of it. But it's like, you just gotta pick your spots in.
Well, it's interesting. We were at a film festival last weekend. Okay. And we're sitting there in the awards ceremony. This is on topic, I promise.
Is this an awards ceremony where all their friends got all the filmmakers' friends?
Every
and
single
them
film
themselves?
festival. That's every film festival known to man.
That's a whole nother episode, boys. Okay. That's a whole nother episode.
Well, I'm gearing up for the producing one. That's what's coming down. We're wrapping up.
But it was super cute. I was actually sitting there with one of our actresses, and the actress turns to me and she's like, "Can I ask you a question?" And I was like, "Yeah, go for it." And she was like, "Why is there a best screenwriting and a best movie award?" And I'm like, "Oh, honey, those are two very different things, And I'm like, the screenplay is judged on the overall story, and the film is judged on the execution of that story.
Yeah.
And I found
the whole.
It's funny. I say this, it's funny because, I hear that question and it's like, I have, for the films that I've won awards for, I haven't won a screenwriting award, but I've always won best short film as a producer, which is based on a story, which is something I've done. So it's kind of weird hearing that, because it's like, if you go by awards and merits, I'm more known as a producer, even though I wrote it. So it's kind of funny hearing that, but they are two very different things, but it just goes to show how,
how the audience doesn't, people and even in the industry don't even understand the difference.
Yeah. No, there's a huge difference, and which we can go into another topic. I always tell people what my favorite film is and what my favorite movie is, because they are two different things.
What are they?
What
is your favorite film?
My favorite film is Goodfellas.
Your favorite movie?
Star Wars.
Okay.
Fun fact, the Goodfellas shine box scene was shot down the block?
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah,
I shall have to frequent this.
Yeah, right down the block where we did our screening last week.
You were telling me about that.
It is the same bar.
We're getting personal now.
Me personally, my favorite film is The Shining.
Okay.
My favorite movie is Creepshow.
Good choices.
You know, because I see that difference there. Film is something that's done. It's artistic. It's meaningful. It's deep.
Yeah.
A movie is entertainment.
Yeah.
You know, and remember that too when you're writing your screenplays, when you're writing your stories. Are you making a film or are you making a movie?
Yeah.
What do you want to do? Do you want to just do something that's fun? Blood Slaughter was a movie. Mm-hmm. That was a movie. We did that because it was fun. Mm-hmm. We got to kill a bunch of people.
What is State of States to you?
To me, it's a film.
Okay.
To me, it's a film.
I would agree with that.
I wrote it with the idea of treating it like a movie.
Yeah.
But the story itself was personal to me, and it was something I've always wanted to do because I love that. Yeah. I love the dreamscapes. I love the nightmares. I love all of that. It's very personal to me. So it was a film, but I treated it like a movie because I said to myself, well, we just made a really friggin' long movie.
Yeah.
Let's prove that we can tell a story in a decent amount, in a 90-minute block and get straight to it. And then my idea was to tell a straightforward story, and then I can get as weird as I want with the visuals, because then at least the audience is not confused with a complicated story and complicated visuals. Then you're making the audience work too hard and they can't enjoy it. Some people love it.
Yeah.
I love that. Like Jacob's Ladder is a complex story and complex visuals.
Yeah.
You know, and while people can love it as a film, a lot of people just like, it wasn't great. You know, I wasn't nuts about it.
It's too much for some people.
But that's why
Event Horizon
we're
was the
lucky
same
in New
way.
York. We have I like to call film houses and movie houses.
Yes.
It's like, when we wrap up and everything, I'm going to the Alamo Draft House, which is a film.
Yes.
That's for film lovers.
Yeah. But you're going to see a movie tonight.
I am going to see a movie tonight, but we won't go into it. It's like that's probably going to be like a regular dig for me because they play a lot of great films.
They do.
That you want to see and you want to cherish.
It's definitely on our list. They have one here in Brooklyn, and I keep following them and keep wanting to go out there.
Yeah, well, you should. I mean, it's just to get on a note, one other book, if you really want to sell a book, it's a more modern one that I read, and it actually helped me with pitching and understanding the business in terms of and everything. It's from Robert Ben Garant and Thomas Lennon. And Thomas Lennon used to be on The State. I love this guy a lot. I always liked him as a State. He was my favorite on there.
Thomas Lennon, Michael Ian
he's
Black,
a great actor,
all
but
of them.
he's a more successful screenwriter than anything because he wrote the Night in the Museum movies. So these are guys who their scripts have made billions of dollars of profit.
Yep.
And they have a book that came out a few years ago called Writing Movies for Fun and Profit.
Yeah.
All right. And I would wholly recommend that because they talk about it in a very interesting way on how they were able, they talk about the art of film, but what that book is important is they teach you the art of the pitch.
Okay.
All right. So I would definitely recommend getting that one.
Cool.
Sid Field's screenplay, of course, Robert McKee's story, A Writer's Journey, of course.
Writer's Journey, Save the Cat, The Hero's Journey.
Save the Cat is probably the one I would start with
specifically for screenwriters.
Yes, that's specifically for screenwriters along with screenplay. Sid Field's four books with screenplay.
It's a lot more fun, too. It's entertaining, so it's an easy kind of first thing to slide into.
Well, the Writing for Fun and Profit, I would tell you right now, buy that like now. For you would just, because that really gets into more of the business part of it.
Right.
If you want to learn it, but it's really a great guide to it. It's helped me out as a guide for the past few years in terms of where I want to go.
And for anybody who's like me who doesn't read as much as I probably should read more, I don't read much at all. If you want to talk about how to make a movie,
Storyboard 101.
There you go. I was going to say also, look up, go on YouTube. You can probably find some of them. Look up Simmons. Look up his 48-hour film school, and he will break down. We'll probably get into this more in our production.
His book is great too, but he has
we'll probably get more into this in the production episode. But he will explain to you the difference between films and movies.
Yeah. And if you go to masterclass.com, they do like different. It's like the masters teaching you things. They have a screenwriting course with Aaron Sorkin, which I'm currently taking. It's only $90, and you get a full blown on sessions. Interviews. He talks about structure.
And these masters classes are like 4 or 5 hours each.
Yeah, if you go through the whole thing,
yes.
It's like a 5-hour course. You can watch it all in one setting. But if you actually go through it and do the assignments that they give you, even though it's an online thing, so you can talk to people online. But even if you just do it yourself and not graded on it, it's still a good lesson to learn on your own because he teaches a lot of great stuff
for $90 to be told how to write to be explained how to write a script by
Aaron
Sorkin is It's priceless.
Yes,
it's
and you can learn
priceless.
films by Fast and the Furious, which we're hearing outside. So,
I mean, even look up on YouTube Joseph Campbell. Check out. There's a ton of different people that cover it. There's a ton of different videos. If you want to start free, you don't want to drop down $500 or whatever, then that's always a good place to start.
I mean, you can learn, and the best thing about screenwriting to me is it's free. Once you apply yourself, you read. If you have the passion for it, read as much as you can on it because it's going to help you, and you need to follow it, and you need to base it. And once you get that concept there, you're going to be fine. And like I said, nothing thrills me more than creating something on paper,
then jump into it. Just write something, right? Just write something, give it to somebody,
but writing
get some feedback.
And I'm going to give you a perfect segue because writing it is one thing, but producing it is a whole other ballgame.
Very nice.
Good way. Good. So that's going to... I think we'll wrap this up now that we've been talking for quite some time. This is a nice long episode. A nice long episode. I hope everybody got a little something out of this. It wasn't as much about structure as we thought it was. This was we talked a lot more about the writer's process, which is extremely important, even before you get to the point where you're going to outline and you need
to know that first before anything.
Yes. You need to understand that
you were going to teach you structure, but
exactly.
you need to get that. Mindset.
Yeah, you need to understand that every writer's process is their own.
Yeah.
There is no one way to get to writing your screenplay. You just make sure that you have a story that you want to tell, something that matters to you, especially when you're first starting out. You can go one of two ways: either write yourself a movie and just do something that's fun, in which case follow those rules, and that'll get you through your screenplay, or write something that's very meaningful to you. Take your time.
Yeah.
And then just make the damn movie already. Just make it. That's all I could say. Just make your damn movie. Write it, and make your friggin' movie.
But do pre-production, please.
Yeah. So, Scott, where can people look you up? Where can they find you?
Well, mainly right now, I'm still in the process of putting together my website, my own personal website.
We're going to have to do this website episode. I'm telling you.
My production company, Slick Devil Entertainment.
Slick Devil Entertainment, but I don't have it up right now. I got to get it back up and running. You can check out everything on infearoftheseries.com. But you can mainly get me on Facebook, facebook.com. / Scott W. Perry. That's basically it. You can also contact me on my email. I have a Vimeo page. If you look at Slick Devil Entertainment, I got my demo reel. I got some old films on there. Okay.
Just look up, just type in Slick Devil Entertainment. You'll find that. And on YouTube, Scott W. Perry. So
cool.
You can find me everywhere. But Facebook is probably your best bet where you can annoy me.
Cool.
Just like I annoy you. So
yeah. So everybody go annoy Scott Perry. Make sure to subscribe to us on iTunes and Stitcher and Google Play. Filmmaking sucks. You can download all of our episodes or archives on there, or you can go straight to massgravepictures.com and get all of them there, as well as our other podcast, What Lurks on Channel X, which is unfortunately on a break right now, but you can get some cool stuff there. There's some interesting stories we discuss, true stories on there. Might even give you some ideas for some good horror films.
And for your writing fans, this is called a pitch, so listen to what they're saying.
So yeah, check us out, massgravepictures.com. Look up Slick Devil Entertainment on Facebook and on Vimeo.
Yep.
And I'm going to do a new one. I keep saying send us your first, but let's do something a little fun. Let's ask for log lines.
Yeah.
Unleash your log line.
Yeah, so we can steal them and make our own films.
I didn't say that.
No. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Massgrave Pictures. Massgrave. Your Lynn is on Twitter under Massgravette. Are you on Twitter, Scott?
I am.
Do you use it?
Not really.
And it doesn't matter.
Scott W. Perry, 1977.
1977, you old bastard.
I am.
And fun fact, we just actually started a Twitter for Theta States. So
Theta_States.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I'll leave it at this. For any writer, producer, and everything like that, I'll probably say this in the next episode as well. We don't need to know every fucking detail that you're doing on your pages when you're writing something. It takes away the fun of actually reading it when you're done.
So I shouldn't take a picture of my notebook and do some funky little filters on it and post it.
Well, I've seen people put like pictures of their pages on it and like every single page, and you're looking at it, and I'm like. And they're like, oh, I'm writing my script. But what they don't realize is that, the phone on there is so big that you can actually blow it up and read every single thing on the page. So you got to be careful with that.
I learned that on a call sheet. Oops, I had somebody's address on a call sheet.
Well, it's like, I'll tell you right now, one of the things I'm doing is I am writing a script with somebody. and we're kind of discussing how we're going to announce it. Is we're just going to show the title page with both our names on it, and that's how we're going to introduce it to people. But we still have to write it first. Yeah. So, but it's not like I'm going to be like, oh, I'm going to do this. It's like I'm going to write this, I'm going to write that. I just finished a script today, which I can post on everything. I mean, I kind of did in a way. I'm like, I said, instead of saying I finished the script, I said I don't know how I feel after finishing it. You got to add something to it, because you put you finishing a script, nobody's going to give a shit. Nobody's going to be like, oh, fuck you.
Yeah, they want to see the movie. They don't care.
They want to see the movie. It's like it's the same people who put out trailers when they shoot for one day. It's just like the movie's not going to come out for 4 years, and you're going to have nothing else to show for it. And people are going to forget by then. They forget in 2 months. So
they do. Been there. All right. So
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's going to wrap us up for this week. Filmmaking sucks. Subscribe to us everywhere you can. Rate us and review us. MassGravePictures.com. Slick Devil Entertainment. Scott W. Perry. Those are all of your keywords. Look for them. So wrap us up. That's it for us. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you got something out of this immensely long conversation. Yeah, that's it. Good night. Good luck. Thank you, everybody, and make good movies.
And do pre-production.